The relationship with the police in France is not good. I think that if you're a brown kid or a black kid in the Western world, you're not really comfortable with the police in general. The only difference is I think that France is way less violent, physically violent than the US. So not everybody has a gun and the police doesn't shoot that often. Even though there's police brutality in France, it usually doesn't go that far. You're going to be harassed by the police if you live in a tough neighborhood. The police will come a couple of times a day and ask you for your IDs and a couple of little small humiliations, stuff like that, but it's not going to be that bad, even though there are some examples. Like a couple of years ago, there were huge riots in the suburbs of Paris, and it's because 2 young kids died trying to run away from the police. They didn't do anything, but the only thing is you're scared of the police. They were scared of the police, so they ran and they got electrified, and it started a huge riot in the suburbs of Paris. If we have one national global history, then we need to talk about everything. The most important thing to know, I think, about the colonial history of France is during the 1900s, France has the second biggest colonial empire after the British Empire. I think the biggest difference with other type of slavery is the fact that there was a first abolition in the French Caribbean, in the French colonies, during the French Revolution. And after the French Revolution, Napoleon said, yeah, there will be slaves again. So they put slavery back on, which is something really fucked up. And in Haiti, because of that, there were huge riots, and this is why Haiti became independent. I don't think there's any example of you're free, and then a couple of years ago, no, actually, no, you need to go back to work. 8 years, that was the first abolition, but that was the first time as well they said, yeah, well, actually, sorry guys, you need to go back to work. About World War II, one of the biggest questions was what about the colonial empire? Because, you know, like 1940, there's the armistice. France is basically giving up. Is it going to be German, Nazi? And actually, a big part of the French resistance was in the colony. The fact that we undermine or underestimate the amount of black soldiers that liberated France. The American generals and the French generals, they didn't really want to have so many pictures of African soldiers liberating Paris. Like black soldiers walking down the Champs-Élysées and saving France, that would be a little bit too much. So there's a theory saying that progressively the troops were getting whiter and whiter as they were approaching Paris. After colonization, well, France became a much smaller country, which is always difficult, you know, when you are such a big empire and you are so powerful, and all of a sudden your influence gets a little bit smaller. Of course, there are still France-Afrique, which is all the relationship that France has with the former colonies, which is not always really clean. Or your dictator, well, you know what, don't care about elections, I will protect you if you let me use your oil and your goods and everything. But of course the influence of France is getting a little bit smaller, and it's difficult to accept that, you know, like, I don't know, 50 years ago, France would say something and everybody would follow. Now it's a little bit different, so they need to adapt. Things are changing. Négritude, it's a movement, we would say a literary movement that was born in Paris in the 1930s, and there were a couple of young guys and young girls, very, very smart, and they were all from the Caribbean and Africa, French colonies. They were studying in Paris in the Latin Quarter, and they were really sick of hearing that there was no culture in Africa, that people from the Caribbean were not smart. So they wanted to use all these, let's say, discriminations and the N-word, the word nigger, as an element of their pride. So they created this word Négritude that became a very large movement. There's a publisher and a bookstore in Paris, in the Latin Quarter as well, named Présence Africaine. And this is where all these writers of La Négritude, this is where they were published, where they used to hang out. There's a lot of this history that happened in Paris that you can see if you want to see it, and that you don't see if you don't want to see it. I have a friend of mine, actually a friend who is white, who gave me a book a French book of sociology named Les Petits Blancs, with like the small white. That could be the white trash if it was in America. And it's like just a new concept, because it looks like if in France white people just found out they were white, you know, because, well, it's true that if you live in Europe, you don't really notice that you're white. If you live in Africa, you don't really know that you're black. But with immigration and diversity, in some contexts, when white people become the minority in some neighborhoods in Paris, they are being called white, which is blanc, which is something new for them. Even for white French people moving to the Caribbean for work, it's a very interesting experience for them, because they are still in France, but suddenly they are the minority. Traditionally, a white person would not call themselves white. They say French. They say that's for me, that's the offensive thing. It's they say, okay, blacks, Arabs, Jews, and Asians and French. You know, it's a little bit like, what are you talking about? It's like, do you say that you're more French than us? I don't even think we have like slang for it yet. Blanc is something new in France. The thing is, I think that in France we really care about integration to make sure that at the end of the day everybody feels French. It's not that important that you say, oh yeah, I feel really British if you're an immigrant in England. In France, when you hear people talking on the news, it's like an obsession. Everybody has to feel really French right now, right away. And I'm like, yeah, give them a little bit of time, you know, there's no hurry. It explains that some subjects are a little bit difficult to talk about, because people are in a hurry in France. They would love that everybody who just arrived in France, all right, maybe 20 years ago, feel perfectly French and forget about their origins and everything. It's like, it's not going to happen. And give them a choice. Maybe they don't want to feel French. Maybe they want to feel something else. From 6 to 9, I lived in Bordeaux, and then I went back to Martinique. So as a child, I noticed that there was a difference. I was not a teenager in France, so there are a lot of discriminations that I never knew, because, well, I was in Martinique and never felt like minority or anything like that. So yeah, maybe it explains that for me, it's I'm a little bit more comfortable to talk about, yeah, the Black Paris, and yeah, there's no taboo about that. I don't really care. So yeah. After the Second World War, there was a sort of vote where they asked people, do you want to be independent? Do you want to stay a colony? Or do you want to become a normal French department? And people of Martinique, of Guadeloupe, of La Réunion, and of French Guyana decided to become a department. So there's the same law as in Paris, as in Marseille, as in Bordeaux, as in Martinique. We have French school, French citizenship. The English islands are independent. They are their own countries, and Martinique, we, in a way, we're a little bit separated, cut off from the rest of the archipelago. So Martinique and Guadeloupe are a little bit on their own. We're not really integrated to the whole. Like a lot of people, even in France, they don't realize where Martinique is, and they don't realize that there are lots of other countries around us, and Central America, Latin America, and the United States. When you're a colony, when you were a colony, the colonizator, the culture of the colonizator has a lot of influences, you know. I think that there are not so many differences between the islands, but the biggest difference is we have it's because, well, their colonizator was English and then Protestant. Ours were French and Catholic, and so it's another language, it's another religion. I would not say tensions, because it's not going to be a war or a riot or anything like that, but it's true that sometimes in Martinique you could hear that people from the other islands, they come and they steal our jobs. You know, like you could hear that in France or in England about immigrants from third world countries. So you would hear the same thing about people from St. Lucia coming to Martinique and abusing our welfare, this type of nonsense. So yeah, it's quite ludicrous to me. So yeah, do you have to leave Martinique at some point in your life to study? And like 100%, yeah, not everybody leaves, but it's true that a lot of people, they go to France or they go abroad to study, and then it's difficult for them to go back. That's why we have demographic problems in Martinique. It's because the younger generation, there's a lot of unemployment. So plus, as we're always obsessed and looking at France, so there are a lot of opportunities that we don't really enjoy, that we don't really take. We don't really go to America, we don't go to Jamaica, we don't go to that much to England, we don't go to South America. So that's a shame. We're always like going to France, and France is the homeland and we love France, and so it's sometimes a little bit too much, I think. Yeah. This debate, colorism, it's 100% in the French Caribbean. A lot of people in Martinique would not tell you, oh, I'm just black. They would tell you, I'm this shade of blackness or this shade of whiteness. So it's a little bit more subtle. It's actually when you come to Europe that will tell you, oh, you're just black. But in Martinique, a lot of people will tell you, no, I'm Chabin, I'm Chapécouli, I'm mulâtre. A lot of different words that different shades of blackness. So it's not just everybody's black. A book named Peau Noire Masque with Black Skins, White Masks, and it was written by Frantz Fanon, who is from Martinique. So in the 1950s. So a lot of things like that. All these problems of self-esteem, yeah, it exists a lot in the Caribbean. I think that if you're a brown kid or a black kid in the Western world, you're not really comfortable with the police in general. There were huge riots in the suburbs of Paris, and it's because 2 young kids died trying to run away from the police. They didn't do anything, but the only thing is you're scared of the police. Black soldiers walking down the Champs-Élysées and saving France, that would be a little bit too much. They didn't really want to have so many pictures of African soldiers liberating Paris. They didn't do anything, but the only thing is you're scared of the police. They were scared of the police, so they ran.